you know that the things we believe are in fact true. And there are ways to know it. We can prove it with an abundance of evidence. Being confident of your salvation. This is our fourth lesson. Why should reasonable people believe in a God they can't even see? Or why doesn't God just show himself? Well, truth is God has shown himself. And that's what I want to discuss. There are a number of lines of reason we can use. Number one, matter demands a maker. Matter is stuff. Okay, you and I are matter. The lights up there, that's matter. These pews, they are matter. If there is matter, if matter exists, then there has to be someone who made matter. The entire universe is matter. Everything in the physical realm is matter. Okay? Now, if there is matter, and there obviously is, some people don't think we even are here. They think we're just a figment of somebody's imagination. I've never got my mind around that one. But we all believe that there is matter and that we exist. Then there must be a maker. And that's what I want to discuss for just a few moments. Common sense teaches the lesson to us, okay? You don't have to be a rocket scientist. Who made the flag on the moon? It's sitting there on the moon. Where did it come from? Who made it? How did it get on the moon? Okay, it just happened. One day there was nothing on the moon. The next day, there they were. There was a moon. I mean, a flag atop the moon. You say, oh, that's not right. Of course it's not right. We look at the flag on the moon, and that is a picture of the flag on the moon. We look at the flag on the moon, and we know somebody had to put it there. Well, why are footsteps seen on the moon? Let me give you a little bigger picture. Why are footsteps seen on the moon? You know what footsteps mean. If you go out in the snow and you see human footsteps around your house, this is your house. And you go outside and in the snow and you see human footsteps going around your house. What do you know? Did those footsteps just miraculously appear? Or does that tell you somebody's been in your yard, walking around your house? Well, there's nobody there. It doesn't matter if anybody's there or not. The footsteps are there. And because the footsteps are there, you know somebody was there. You don't know who it was. You don't know if it was a man or woman. You don't know how tall they were. But one thing's certain, somebody was there. The footsteps are proof that somebody was there. This is what Paul was talking about in Romans chapter 1, verse 20. When he said, since the creation of the world, since God created the world, Genesis 1:1, his invisible attributes, the attributes of God, his strength, his wisdom, his grace, his loveliness, his beauty, the attributes of God, they're invisible, nevertheless they are clearly seen. How? Being understood by what? The things that are made by matter. Okay? Just as you look in the snow and see footprints, you know somebody was walking around your house. Even though you can't see them, you know that they were there. Well, when you look at what God has created, what Paul's saying, you see God. His invisible attributes are everywhere. He goes on to say that people that deny that are without excuse, because only an unreasonable person can't realize that there must be God. There has to be a maker. How did a moon rover get on the moon? That's a very, very, very expensive piece of machinery. How did it come? Just popped? This is silly, isn't it? Silly question. I know it's silly. But, you know, people are taught this in schools and universities. People are taught this stuff. That footprints doesn't mean a person was there. Footprints don't tell you anything. Footprints may have just happened. Same thing with that moon rover. It may have dropped off of Mars or something, fell on the moon. People come up with all kinds of excuses why reality isn't reality. Why? They want to deny the existence of God. When you look at this piece of machinery, what you know is that it didn't get there by accident. Somebody put it there. Every physical effect must have an adequate antecedent simultaneous cause. This is what's known as the law of cause and effects, the law of causality in science. Notice what they're saying. Every effect, physical effect, something of this world. Everything of this world. There must be an adequate, antecedent, simultaneous cause. Theories, design, science, engineering, men and women, and a whole lot of money put these on the moon. We all know that. We know it. Common sense tells us that much. You don't have to be a genius to understand the Bible. You just got to have some common sense. If you ain't got no common sense, you're going to be in a whole lot of trouble. But if you got some common sense, you can pretty much figure most all of it out. These things were no accident. Now, notice the words adequate. It means power, intelligence, desire. If I said a fly made these trays right here, you would say, well, that's silly. Flies can't make trays. Flies don't know how to get ore out of the ground, polish it, machine it, drill holes in it. Flies can't do stuff like that, and you're right. Because that I said that flies made those trays, which would be the effect. The cause is inadequate. Well, that's silly. It can't work that way. And we all know that too. Every physical effect, this is of course the law of science. Every physical effect must have an adequate, something capable of creating something, making something. Well, what about when it comes to the universe? The universe is an effect. Whoever created the universe had to have the power, the intelligence, the wherewithal to create it. As a matter of fact, whoever created the universe had to be capable of taking nothing and turning it into something. Because the universe has not always been here. We'll get to that in a few moments. Antecedent, it must come before simultaneous. Well, when you look at the Range Rover, what we know, that's the effect, the Range Rover. What we know is the cause had to have come before the Range Rover wound up on the moon. Here on planet Earth, there was a theory. There was a design. They were mechanical engineers. There were industrial engineers. There were electrical engineers. There were scientists. There were lab technicians. There were thousands of people all around the globe involved in making that piece of machinery. In addition to that, it cost a whole lot of money. The cause came before the effect. Those who made this machine existed before this machine wound up on the moon. That's what you mean by this statement, antecedent, it came before. Sometimes the cause may come at the same time as the physical effect. I don't want to get into that, it's not really necessary, but sometimes it does happen. What I want to point out mostly, number one, it has to be adequate. Number two, it has to have come before the effect came into being. This is what God was saying in Hebrews chapter 3 and verse 4. He actually said the law of cause and effect, even though that wasn't his intention at all. He simply said, for every house is built by someone. We'll look at the phrase. Whenever you see a house, you know someone built it. If I told you that this house just appeared one day, you'd say you're crazy. Why? Because somebody had to build it. Somebody had to make the house. If somebody hadn't made the house, there wouldn't be a house, would there? Of course not. Everything we see, go out there and see a bunch of cars in the parking lot. What do you know? Somebody built it. Who are they? I don't know. Never seen them. Don't know if it's men or women or both. Have no idea who built my car. But I know somebody built my car. How do you know that? Because the car exists. Okay? Just common sense. And this is what God was saying in the Hebrew writer, through the Hebrew writer, I should say. Every house has to be built by someone. Therefore, he who built all things is God. God built everything that exists. It's just simple. It's very simple. It doesn't take a lot of this to understand it. The universe is a physical effect. It's a part of the material or the natural world, the universe. Now, remember the law. Every effect, the universe, must have an adequate antecedent cause. Okay? And that's what you want to focus on. Someone, somewhere, had to have created the universe. That's what the law of cause and effect leads us to. That's the conclusion. Keep in mind, this is science. Now, this is factual science. This is reality. It's not what some science is, pseudoscience. This is real science. Every cause must have an adequate antecedent, every effect, rather, must have an adequate antecedent simultaneous cause. Well, first, there was God, or cause. Second came the effect. The cause we call God, and the effect we call matter. Okay? Not hard, so I don't believe in God. Well, of course, a lot of people don't believe in God. Nevertheless, the evidence says there has to be God. Now, it may not be the God we worship, but there has to be God. Somebody somewhere had to have made it. The building wouldn't be here if someone hadn't made it. The universe wouldn't be here if someone hadn't made it. It has to be that way. It can't be any other way. The universe is matter. And therefore, it was caused by an external force. You gotta, when you study about the existence of God, you can't really use the Bible. I'm using the Bible simply to buttress some of the things I'm saying. But you can't use the Bible. First, you got to prove that God exists. And once you've established the fact that God exists, then you can prove that God wrote the Bible. Okay? But first of all, we got to establish that God exists, and that we do through the natural world. God made all things that exist so we could see what? His invisible attributes. The things that exist so we can see God. Even though we can't see God. Well, that's silly. No, I can see a person walking around my house even though I can't see a person that walked around my house. I know they were there. I've seen their footprints. I know God's out there. Why? I see his fingerprints. It's all over the place. Everybody can see God. Even a blind person can see God. They can hear the sound of a voice. They can feel touch. They can feel wood. They can feel human being. They can see God. Even though they can't see anything else, they can see God. It's really possible. Defying scientific laws, science promotes what's called the Big Bang Theory. This is very popular in science classes across the land. There was a Big Bang. I hope there's no teachers here that teach the Big Bang. I know you got to. They make you teach stuff like that. But I hope you qualify it when you have to teach it. I think children ought to know about this stuff. You know, people say, I wouldn't send my kid to public school because I don't want them to hear all that junk. No, they really need to hear all that junk. This way they'll know what people are talking about when they talk to people. This way they'll know how to defend what they believe. There's nothing wrong with hearing about stuff as long as you know what the truth is. Then you can get on top of the stuff and walk with God. Okay? The Big Bang Theory occurred over 14 billion years ago. All energy and matter in the universe, they say, was contained in a tiny, tiny ball. Very small, little ball. Actually, the ball was smaller than that ball. The ball was so small that you can't see it with the naked eye. And I couldn't do that to you. I had to give you something you could see. So I made the ball 1,000 times bigger than what they say it actually is. Okay? What happened? Well, one day there was a bang! You got a universe. It came out of that little ball. Look out at stars. And just think of everything that's beyond the stars. It all came out of a tiny, tiny, tiny little ball. Now I can make that statement because matter cannot be created. Everything that exists, all the galaxies, I don't know how far it runs out there, had to be inside that little bitty small ball that you can't even see with the naked eye. That's the Big Bang Theory. Your children, they may have to learn that stuff, but now you can teach them how silly it is. How'd you cram all that stuff in that little bitty ball? I can't hardly get all my stuff in a van. How did they get it all in a ball? Defying scientific law, scientists promote this. The question still has to be asked. It doesn't matter how small you make the universe. The question ultimately that has to be asked, where did the tiny, tiny ball come from? It has to come from somewhere. It's matter and energy. And matter and energy can't be created or destroyed according to the laws of science. Where did it come from? Well, they answer that question too. Atheists and the agnostics speak out. Stephen Hawking is probably one of the most popular, quote, scientists in the world. On national television, Discovery Channel, Curiosity, did God create the universe? Here's what he said. Nothing caused the Big Bang. Nothing. It just happened. Nothing became something all of a sudden. Nothing caused it. The common answer is nothing. Nothing. We believe in God. We see his fingerprints everywhere. They say we're silly. This man believes that nothing became something, and then it blew up. And everything that exists came out of that nothing that became something. A ball so small that you can't even see it. Now, how silly is that? Imagine how your pickup truck came out of that little ball. Your pickup truck was in that ball, because all matter can't be created or destroyed. Therefore, that pickup truck you drive was in that ball. How did it happen? How did you get a pickup truck in that tiny, tiny ball that you can't even see with your eye? I'm ridiculing it. I understand I'm ridiculing it. Why? Because it's silly. It's silly, silly, silly. It's silly, silly, silly. Well, Stephen Hawking's a very famous man. I don't care who he is. It's silly. And silly ought to be identified as silly. In their book, Grand Design, Hawking and Ludendorff asserted this. Bodies such as stars and black holes cannot just appear out of nothing. Where do stars come from? Well, they're a part of the universe at large. Why? Because a star can't just appear out of nothing. Neither can a black hole. Okay? Things like that just don't happen. Now watch this. But the whole universe can. A star can't come from nothing, but the entire universe can. This is why I ridicule it, because it's ridiculous. This is the part they don't tell us in school, and I want you to tell your children, and I want your children to listen. Because it's silly. You don't have to be ashamed to think it's silly, because it's silly. And why the government insists on this stuff being taught, I do not know. I heard the other day, 7-year-old boy wants to be turned into a girl. Mama said, yeah, Daddy said no. Mama gets her way, they're going to make the change. It wasn't very long ago, it was a 15-year-old boy. He decided he wanted to be a girl. So they turned him into a girl. At age 17, he wanted to be turned back into a boy. So they turned him back into a boy. Then he was sterile, because he had previously been turned into a girl. Now he's sterile. He can't make children. So what does he do? He wants to be turned back into a girl at age 21. From 15 to 21 rather, this kid flipped 3 times. How silly has our world become? How silly has it become? How silly is it that a mother would let a 7-year-old boy who said, I'd like to be a girl, be turned into a girl? That kid doesn't know up and down yet. And you're going to take instructions from him? What's wrong with the world? Parents are. They're nuttier than the kids are. Something's gone haywire. And I think it's got a lot to do with what's been pressed upon us as truth. That's not truth at all. But smart people say it is truth, and therefore, well, if I don't believe it, I'll be a dummy. I'd rather be a dummy. I'd really rather be a dummy. I'd really rather be a dummy. This is silly. At Todd Trial, he asked Dan Barker on YouTube. He asked Dan Barker a question. Do you really believe that something came from nothing? Do you really believe that, in spite of all the evidence that says that can't happen? Do you really believe that? His answer was simply yes. He believed it. In nature, according to the laws of science, in nature, matter and energy are neither created nor destroyed. That's very important. You know that when God created the heavens and the earth, everything that God created during that week, 6-day week, everything is still here. You know that? It's still here. That can't be true. I burned a stick of wood last night. It's still here. It's in a different form, but it's still here. You can't destroy matter. You can burn it up. You can bury it. You can do whatever you want to do, but it's still here. Somewhere, it's still here. It might be smoke. It might be ash. It may have somehow become a part of the chemicals of the earth, but it's still here. You can't create matter. It just can't be done. It's never been done, and everybody knows that's true. And by the same token, therefore, you can't destroy matter. You can't destroy the evidence, so to speak, because it always exists. It just changes its physical shape, properties, but it's still here. And this is what science has learned over the years. In nature, matter and energy are neither created nor destroyed. Scientists refer to this fact as the first law of thermodynamics. Very important law. It's one they live by. Okay? Nothing can be created or destroyed in nature. That's very important. Remember that, in nature. To say nothing created the tiny, tiny ball is unreasonable, illogical, irrational, and it's unscientific. But Stephen Hawking, one of the world's most renowned scientists, said that's what happened. Nothing got busy and became something. Well, scientists have already proven that that's not possible. Yeah, but this is Stephen Hawking saying, you gotta listen to Stephen Hawking. No, you don't. You don't have to listen to Stephen Hawking. He may be smarter than me in a lot of stuff, but I got enough sense to know what he's saying is true. Nothing can't become something. If it could, I'd have a Corvette in my garage. But it doesn't work that way. That little tiny, tiny ball, assuming it ever existed, that little tiny, tiny ball was composed of matter and energy, okay? That's so important. Now, in nature, the natural order of things, the way nature works, which is what that tiny, tiny little ball would be. In nature, matter and energy are neither created nor destroyed. Therefore, everything that exists in that tiny, tiny little ball that you can't see with your eye, everything that exists was at one time in that tiny, tiny ball. The world's too big to cram into that tiny, tiny, tiny little ball. Why do they teach our children this stuff? Why do they do that? I remember hearing about the Big Bang when I was a kid. I thought it was true. My teacher said so. And I believed it for a long time. Then one day I picked up a book and actually read it, and it wasn't true. It was pseudoscience. I was fortunate enough to get above it. A lot of people aren't. And it's sad, because they believe a lot of silly stuff. It's very sad. In a book, The Beginning, What Triggered the Big Bang, and the book is entitled The Universe in 4 Hours. Oh, I'm sorry, it was a New Scientist article. In the New Scientist, what they're doing is they're arguing that the Big Bang is true, okay? That's their argument. The Big Bang is true. They summarized it in the last line of the article this way. The quest to understand the origin of the universe seems destined to continue until we can answer a deeper question. Why is there anything at all instead of nothing? That's a good question. Think about it. If nothing existed in the past, then nothing would exist today. Isn't that true? If matter and energy in nature cannot be created or destroyed, then nothing can't possibly become something. But we're told that's what happened. Why do they want to tell us that? Why do they want us to believe? You know, if a person believed that, they won't believe in God, would they? If I believed in that tiny, tiny little ball, then what I read about God goes out the window. Isn't that right? It might be why they wanted to come up with this idea. Reckon? One more way to oppose God, to remove God from our shores, cause us to believe something that's not true at all. I'm not going to let them teach my children this stuff. A lot of times my kids come home and tell me something they were told that day. I had to promise not to go yell at the teacher, and they would tell me something that they learned that day. You know what? It wasn't even true. Wasn't true. And told stuff that wasn't true. Why? Well, ultimately, you prove that there is no God. If people believe it. Unless, of course, the universe is eternal. That's a whole other story there now. If the universe is eternal, you don't have to explain where the Big Bang come from, because it was always here. It's eternal after all. But the universe is not eternal. How do you know? Well, second law of thermodynamics. We know it's not true. Science proves it's not true. This isn't me. This is what you read in the science textbook. I think you still read it. The second law of thermodynamics says matter and energy become less usable over time. What does that mean? The world's wearing out. It's winding down. It's like an alarm clock. Take an alarm clock at night, what do? You wind that thing up till it won't crank anymore. You wound it up fully, and what happens? It winds down till there's no power left. You got to wind her up again. Well, according to science, that's the way our world is. It's wearing out. It's winding down. It's not because we're destroying it, like they say. It's because God wants it to wear down. He didn't mean for it to be here all the time. It's just a tool, like a wrench or a screwdriver. And when he gets done with his tools, he puts them, well, he throws them away. Because he doesn't need them anymore. If he needs another wrench or screwdriver, I suppose he'd just create one. So when he gets done with this tool, we call our universe, he'll discard it. Peter says he'll burn it up. The elements, matter, will melt with fervent heat. He made the world this way. What does that mean? That means there was a point in time, back yonder somewhere, when God wound up the world. And there's a point somewhere out in the future where the world is going to wear down. Now, I don't think the world will ever wear down. Why? Because Jesus said he's going to come back and destroy it himself. So the world's not going to wear out. It's just heading in that direction. Because the Lord will come back before then. He'll destroy the world himself. He saved that for himself. When you think about the second law of thermodynamics, think about that alarm clock. Because that's the way our world works. And they got a lot of ways to prove it. Pressure inside the earth. There's pressure inside the earth that pushes outward. Like a tire, spare tire or a tire on your car. You fill the tire up with air, 40 pounds of air. And over a period of time, what happens? Some of the air escapes from the tire. You measure your air pressure again, you had 40 pounds, now you got 35 pounds. What does that tell you? It tells you that the tire is losing some of its pressure. How long it takes? Well, I don't know. You can determine that for yourself. Well, the world is the same way. It's got pressure, internal pressure in it. I don't know how many PSI it is, but it's a whole lot. But they measure the pressure. And then they measure it later. And you know what they discovered? Pressure's going down. The tire's going flat. Not that it'll ever go flat. It won't. Jesus will come back first. But it's headed in that direction. That's what the second law of thermodynamics teaches. Matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can't be done. It just doesn't work that way. And matter and energy becomes less usable. You haven't got as much as you used to have. The world that Adam walked on had more pressure under his feet than the world you and I are walking on. There were a lot of things that existed in Adam's day that don't exist today. A lot of things. The world is winding down. Don't be afraid of it going dead. It won't. Jesus will come back first. But I just want to make a point that matter and energy become less usable. What does that mean? Matter and energy are not eternal. It hasn't been here forever. If it had been here forever, it wouldn't be here anymore. Why? Because the alarm clock winds down, and it would be gone. Remember a few things. If the universe is not eternal, and it's not. If it was once wound up, and it was, someone, not of this world, can't be of the material world. Why? Because that would be matter. It has to be something that transcends matter. Something of another dimension, something of another world, something that is not of this world, something or someone would have to wind it up. They had to wind up the earth in the beginning. And that someone we call God. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Number two, life demands a life giver. Real quickly, I can't get through all this, but I want to get this one on you before you can think about it. It's, I think, a good lesson. It impressed me a lot the other day. This female is called HRP 4C. That's her name. She's a female humanoid robot. Not quite human. Humanoid. It's a robot. Okay? It was built by Japan's National Institute of Advanced Industrial Science and Technology. It was displayed for the very first time March 16, 2009. It's the most advanced robot in the world. There's nothing else like it. It surpasses everything that man has ever made. Now here's what the creator of this robot has to say about it. For all the money, man-hours, and technology applied to the field of robotics, robots simply cannot perform standard tasks, little bitty tasks, that an average human does with little thought or exertion. Even though it's the greatest robot in the world, it can't do the smallest things that human beings can do. The demonstration back in 2009, it didn't go all smoothly. The robot often looked surprised, opening its mouth and eyes in a stunned expression when the demonstrator asked it to smile or look angry. He said, "Smile, honey." And what'd she do? She looked angry. Or he might say, "Look angry." And she would smile, be happy. She wouldn't take orders. Kind of reminds me of BR. She wouldn't smile or look angry upon command. Its walk was also not quite ready for the Paris collection, partly because its knees are permanently bent. Look at there. I can bend my knees. A robot can't. Greatest robot ever invented. And it can't bend his knees like I can. That's a minor chore, I think. It has sensors in its feet, but it lacks the sensitive balance of a real human being. Now think about it. The humanoid requires thousands of scientists, biologists, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, computer engineers, and thousands of man-hours at a cost of billions and billions of dollars. Everybody and their brother was involved in building that thing. And what he got? He said, well, this is just the first step. After all that, and it's just the first step, how challenging it must have been to make this humanoid. Future steps in that direction will cost billions, consume massive amounts of research time, and require input from thousands of brilliant men and women across the globe. These things do not just happen by accident. When I read that, I got tickled. These things do not just happen by accident. That robot didn't happen by accident, but the entire universe did. What do you think about that? Yeah, it's crazy. I believe that robot didn't happen by accident. I believe it took a people a whole lot smarter than me to make it. And I believe it couldn't happen by accident. So why would I think the universe could? That makes no sense at all. When you compare the human being to the humanoid, you've got something that doesn't even compare to one another. The human being has a manufacturing system in its body. It can ingest food, digest food, send food particles throughout the bloodstream, bringing oxygen to various parts of the body. And when it's done doing what it does, going through all these various processes, then it's got a disposal department. It has a garbage truck, if you will, and it collects all the garbage and takes it out of the body. A robot can't do that. If I cut my arm will heal. If I hit that robot with a hammer and pop a hole in it, it'll never heal. If I break my bone, give it time, and it'll heal. It'll knit back together. I don't have to do it. It does it by itself. That robot can't do that. The robot has to be cared for. Somebody has to plug the thing up. I don't have to have anybody plug me up. I know how to cook food. I know how to consume food. And I know how to discard food. I don't need help like that. After all this time, all this energy, all this work, they come up with something that is by far inferior to a human being. And this Japanese man, he said, things like this don't happen by accident. How could I possibly believe that a human being could happen by accident? Makes no sense at all. Again, in the beginning, God created. He took nothing and turned it into something. The word created. He didn't build it. He created it. He took a bunch of nothing and made something. Why? Because he's not a part of the natural world. The laws apply to the natural order of things. God doesn't fit in the natural order of things. He's supernatural. He's divine. He's deity. He's not of this world. And he has the power, the wherewithal, the intelligence to say, in the beginning, let there be light. And light appears. Just because he willed it. He didn't have to lift a finger. He didn't have to have a work shed. He didn't have to have an engine lathe or a milling machine. He said, I want light to appear. And it appeared. That's the power of God. The psalmist, he thought on these things, and look at what he thought about. Speaking to God, he said, I will praise you. Why? I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. I read about a German one time. I think it's German or Russian, I can't remember. Eating breakfast one morning, looked over his little boy, just a baby, and he got to looking at his ear, the way his ear was like a funnel, and the way sound would go down in that funnel. And he thought, what a brilliant engineer designed this and made that ear. And he realized this couldn't happen by accident, which he previously believed. There had to be a designer, and there had to be a maker. There had to be someone that designed that ear and made it work. And he became a believer over his little boy's ear. I've told you before, you can take your little finger and prove that God exists. You know why I said that now? Because every part of your body proves God exists. And there's 6 billion people on the earth, and everyone is a testimony to the existence of God. Had it not been for God, there would not be 6 billion people. There wouldn't be a world to put them on. There wouldn't be stars to look at. There would be, as it was originally, nothing. Because nothing can't become something. I want to help you try to understand and buttress your existing faith. There's some more things I would like to discuss in the future, not next week, but in the future. I hope it's helpful.